Study Section 2, Theory of Consumer Behavior. Introduction. There are three sets of economic agents, namely household, firms, and government. Each economic agent has to solve its economic problems. In this study section, you will examine the concept of utility and the basic approaches to its study, namely cardinalist and ordinalist approach to utility maximization. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this section, you should be able to differentiate between utility and importance, highlight the cardinal and ordinal approaches to the study of utility, point out the consumer equilibrium, explain the meaning of ordinal utility, discuss marginal rate of substitution, differentiate between an indifference curve and budget line, show where the indifference curve is tangential to the budget line. Concept of utility. The traditional theory of demand begins with the examination of the consumer, since the market demand is assumed to be the demand of individual consumers. The theory of consumer behavior, however, tries to examine how households maximize utility or satisfaction given their income and the market prices of goods and services. The rationality assumption guides this consumer to allocate its scarce resources in such a way as to derive maximum satisfaction or utility, which is often known as the axiom of utility maximization. Utility can be defined as a satisfaction that is derived from the consumption of a particular commodity or service. Simply put, it is one satisfying property of a commodity. This utility in terms of satisfaction is a subjective or relative concept. A commodity which gives Mr. A satisfaction may not give Mr. B the same satisfaction. Thus, it varies from one individual to another individual and from time to time. It may also not give the same satisfaction to the same individual at different points of time. There are basically two approaches to the study of utility. They are 1. The cardinal approach, and 2. The ordinal approach. The cardinal school postulates that utility can be measured either in monetary units or in subjective units called utils. The ordinal school, on the other hand, postulated that utility is not measurable but is an ordinal magnitude. To them, the consumer may not know in specific units the utility of various commodities to make his choice. It suffices for him to be able to rank the various baskets of goods according to the satisfaction he would derive from each commodity bundle consumed. Question. If Mr. A derived his satisfaction of 2 utils from consuming commodity X, which approach was used in calculating this utility? Feedback. Cardinal approach. Assumption underlying cardinal utility theory. The main assumptions are 1. Rationality. This implies that the consumer aims at the maximization of his utility subject to his budget constraints. 2. Cardinal utility. The utility of each commodity is measurable in monetary units by the amount the consumer is willing to give up to obtain another unit of the commodity consumed. 3. Constant marginal utility of money. This assumption opposes the fact that any standard unit of measurement should be constant. 4. Diminishing marginal utility. The marginal utility of a commodity consumed diminishes as the consumer acquires larger quantities. 5. Total utility. The total utility derived from a commodity bundles consumed depends on the quantities derived from each individual commodity consumed. If there are n commodities in the bundle with quantities x1, x2 to xn, the total utility is V equal to F bracket open x1, x2 to xn bracket closed. Question. Highlight the basic assumptions of cardinal approach to utility. Feedback. Rationality, cardinal utility, constant marginal utility of money, diminishing marginal utility, and total utility. Ordinal utility approach. The cardinal utility approach has been subjected to several criticisms. Firstly, it is extremely doubtful whether utility can be measured objectively. Second, constant utility of money is also seen as unrealistic. And lastly, the axiom of diminishing marginal utility was seen to be established from introspection. This criticism later informed the introduction of ordinal utility of indifference curve approach. Indifference curve. An indifference curve is the locus of points that yield the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Thus, for two commodities X and Y, the indifference curve shows all combinations of commodities X and Y that yields equal satisfaction to the consuming units. This is depicted below in figure 2.1. Y-axis and X-axis. Y1, Y2, and Y3. X1, X2, X3. An indifference map shows all the indifference curves which rank the preferences of the consumer. Combination of goods lying on a higher IC yield higher level of satisfaction and is preferred and vice versa. See figure 2.2 below. X and Y axis, zero origin, curve 1 and curve 2. Properties of the indifference curve. An indifference curve has the following properties. 1. Indifference curves are always downward sloping and curve to the origin. 2. They do not intersect. 3. An indifference curve passes through every point of the commodity space. The further away of the IC curves from the origin, the higher satisfaction it gives. Question. What are the properties of indifference curves? Feedback. Indifference curves has the following properties. Indifference curves are always downward sloping and convex to the origin. Indifference curves do not intersect one another. An indifference curve passes through every point of the commodity space. Equilibrium of the consumer. In order to analyze consumer equilibrium, two different scenarios will be looked into. First, a case of a single commodity, and second, if there are n commodities. A single commodity case. For a consumer to be in equilibrium, he must be able to equate the marginal utility of, say, commodity X to its market price Px. Symbolically, we have MUX equal to Px, equation 1. It is quite possible to have this other situation, mu greater than Pn, equation 2. Where this occurs, the marginal utility of X being greater than its price, such consumer can only increase its welfare by purchasing more units of X. Similarly, if MUX is less than PX, equation 3, that is, marginal utility from X is less than its market price, consumer can equally increase its total satisfaction by reducing the quantity of X. It can only attain the maximization of its utility when MUX is equal to PX. And commodities case. The condition for the equilibrium of the consumer is the equality of the ratios of the marginal utilities of the individual commodities to their prices. This is stated thus: MUX over PX is equal to MUY over PY to MUN over PN, on and on. 4. This condition means that the utility derived from spending an additional unit of money must be the same for all commodities. Mathematical derivation of the equilibrium of the consumer. Let us assume an utility function U equal to F bracket open Q X bracket close. That is U equal to function of QX. If the consumer buys QX, his total expenditure incurred will be QX PX, where QX is the quantity of commodity X and PX is the price of that same commodity X. U minus PX QX equals equation 2. This shows the difference between its utility and its expenditure. Taking the partial derivatives of the function with respect to QX and equate it, the U, the QX minus the bracket open PX QX bracket close over the QX equals 0, equation 3. The U, the QX equal to PX, where the U, the QX equal to MUX. MUX is equal to PX. Consumer preferences. Ordinary utility approach deals with consumer preferences. The idea of preference is based on the consumer's behavior. Enzymes of consumer preference. 1. Completeness. If we assume that consumer weakly prefer commodity bundle X to Y or commodity Y to X or both. Symbolically, if bracket open X1, X2, bracket closed greater than or equal to bracket open Y1, Y2, bracket closed, or bracket open Y1, Y2, bracket closed is greater or equal to bracket open X1, X2, bracket closed, or both. 2. Reflexivity. We assume that to the consumer, any bundle is at least as good as itself. Bracket open X1, X2, bracket close is greater than or equal to bracket open Y1, Y2, bracket closed. 3. Transitivity. If the consumer thinks that commodity bundle X is at least as good as Y and that Y is at least as good as Z, then the consumer thinks that X is at least as good as Z. Symbolically, If bracket open x1, x2 bracket closed is greater than or equal to bracket open y1, y2 bracket closed, and bracket opened y1, y2 bracket closed greater than or equal to bracket open z1, z2 bracket closed, then we assume that bracket open x1, x2 bracket closed is greater or equal to bracket open z1, z2 bracket closed. Note: read Intermediate Microeconomics by Varian. Marginal rate of substitution. It is defined as the rate at which a consumer is willing to exchange one commodity for another while maintaining the same level of satisfaction. For two commodities, X and Y, the MRS is the rate at which Y can be given up in order to consume more of commodity X, while the individual still maintain the same level of satisfaction. Mathematical derivation of marginal rate of substitution. Assuming a utility function U is equal to F bracket open X, Y bracket closed. Equation 1. Taking total differential du equal to du over dy dy plus du over dx dx. Equation 2. Du is equal to bracket open muy bracket closed dy plus bracket open mux bracket closed dx. Question 3. Du equal to bracket open muy bracket closed dy plus mux dx equals 0. Muy dy is equal to minus mux dx. Minus dy dx is equal to mux over muy is equal to mrx y. Loss is always equal to gain because what the concept of MRS entails is the concept of opportunity cost or trade-off. Budget line. The budget line is the locus of commodity bundles whose purchases would exhaust the consumer's income at each of the prices. This simply implies the amount of commodity that a consumer can consume at a given level of income and at a given price. It also called the line of attainable combination. Mathematical derivation of budget line. Let a consumer budget constraint be represented as thus: y equal to px qx plus py qy. Px qx is equal to y minus py qy. Qx is equal to y over px minus py over px qy. If qy is equal to 0, qx is equal to y over px. Similarly, qy is equal to y over py minus px over py qx. If qx is equal to 0, qy is equal to y over px. Slope of budget line. The slope of the budget line is OA over OB is equal to y over py equal to y over px is equal to px over py. The slope of the budget line is equal to the ratio of the prices of the two commodities X and Y. Question: highlight the three axioms upon which consumer preference is based. Feedback: completeness, reflexivity, transitivity, consumer equilibrium. This is said to occur at a point where the indifference curve is tangential to the budget line. This is shown in diagram 2.8 below. This occurs at point P. It is at this point that the slope of indifferent curve equals to the slope of the budget line. Symbolically, MUX, MUY is equal to PX, PY is equal to MRS, XY. It is also possible to have the indifference curve intersecting the budget line as shown below. Given the indifference map of the consumer and its budget line, the equilibrium is defined by the point of tangency of the budget line with the highest attainable indifference curve. This occurs at point E. Mathematical derivation of consumer's equilibrium. The consumer aims at the maximization of the utility given its income and market prices. Assuming that there are n commodities available to the consumer with given market prices P1 to P2, and the consumer has a money income Y, the problem can be formally stated as maximum utility U equal to F bracket open Q1 Q2 to Qn bracket closed. Subject to P1 Q1 is equal to P1 Q1 plus P2 Q2 plus Pn Qn is equal to Y. This function can be specified using the Lagrangian multiplier. Z is equal to U minus bracket open P1 Q1 plus P2 Q2 plus Pn Qn minus Y bracket closed. The first condition for the maximization of a function is that its partial derivatives be equal to 0. Differentiating Z with respect to Q1 to Qn and equating it to 0 yields d over Q1 is equal to dz over dQ1 minus lambda P1 is equal to 0. dz, the Q2 is equal to dz dQ2 minus lambda P2 is equal to 0. dz dQn is equal to dz dQn minus lambda Pn is equal to 0. The z, the lambda is equal to minus bracket open P1 Q1 plus P2 Q2 plus Pn Qn minus Y bracket closed is equal to 0. From these equations, we obtain dz dQ1 is equal to lambda P1, dz dQ2 is equal to lambda P2, dz dQn is equal to lambda Pn. Note that dz dQ1 is equal to mu1, dz dQ2 is equal to mu2, and dz dQn is equal to mun. Substituting and solving for lambda, we obtain mu1 over p1 is equal to mu2 over p2 is equal to mun over pn. Alternatively, we can divide the preceding equation corresponding to commodity X by the equation which refers to Y and obtain mux over muy is equal to px over py is equal to mrxy. Question. Draw an indifference curve with a budget line and show how the indifference is tangential to the budget line. studies section summary. In this studies section, you learn that the difficulties associated with measuring utility by cardinal approach led to the introduction of the ordinal utility or indifference curve approach. Do not forget that an indifference curve is the locus of combination of points that yield equal satisfaction to the consumer. We can have many indifference curves, and the higher the indifference curve, the more the satisfaction that is derived. This is the end of studies section 2. Thanks for listening.